Like most other people out there, I used to think that if I ever wanted to build muscle and gain strength, I would have to track everything I ate, especially protein, and I would have to eat as much of it as I possibly could. But the truth is actually much simpler than that. So if you've been wondering how much protein you need to eat, that's what we're going to go through in this video. Now, we'll get to how much you should eat in a minute, but first, let's talk about why we need protein. Why is it so important for average, normal people, not just bodybuilders, not just Olympians? So obviously, protein molecules are the building blocks of muscle. It's used for building and repairing muscle, as well as a few other processes in the body that aren't really relevant to this video. If we don't have enough, we can't build muscle. If we really don't have enough, we can lose the muscle that we already have. So this is bad news if you're over 40 especially, because after about this age, we lose 8% of our muscle mass each decade if we don't intervene in some kind of way. So we want to build, or at the very least maintain, the muscle mass that we have. Working out with weights or body weight is one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is eating enough protein. So how much exactly should you be aiming to eat? Well, it depends on the type of protein, which we'll talk about in a minute, but the answer to this question can get quite confusing. If you look online, you'll see recommendations that say anywhere from 1.6 to 3.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight you have should be your goal. But this doesn't actually take into account fat mass. If you're 100 kilos, but most of it's fat, you don't need 1.6 to 3.2 times 100 kilos in protein. That's completely overkill. If you're an Olympian or you're a bodybuilder, this amount of protein might be beneficial to you. But as the average person like you and me who just wants to be in good shape, wants to build muscle, wants to feel confident and have a good quality of life, we don't need that much. I think a good recommendation for the average person who is an average height is between 110 to 140 grams of protein a day. So there's still a big range. If you're really set on trying to build muscle, try and aim for more protein, maybe 140 grams a day. If you're simply trying to maintain, 110 grams would be enough. Even 100 grams is probably enough to maintain most of your muscle mass. On any given day, I probably fall into the middle of that range in terms of my own intake, but I don't track anything. So do you have to track? If you're carrying too much body fat or you want to know if you are eating enough protein, you can track if you want to. Tracking your calories, tracking your protein can help, but in my opinion, you need to have a defined start and end date. I hate the idea that's been pushed around that people should be tracking their calories every single day. Calorie tracking should not be a lifestyle. It should be a tool to help you understand how much you eat or how much of a certain macro or micronutrient you eat if you're worried you're deficient. So no, you don't need to track, but you could if you really want to for a short period of time just to figure out what you're currently eating. Now we're going to talk about how you can space your protein intake throughout the day, but first let's talk about types of protein because not all protein is equal. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into a sciencey spiel about amino acids and protein metabolism. This channel is obviously all about making things as simple as possible, but let's talk about the quality because animal protein is far better than plant protein. And what I mean by this is that if you ate 10 grams of an animal protein, so that's anything that's derived from dairy, meat, eggs, your body can normally use more than 9 grams of it. So more than 90% of that protein is actually absorbed and used by the body. However, if you eat 10 grams of plant-based protein, so this could be seeds, nuts, legumes, chickpeas, your body can only use between 50 to 80% of it. For your body to absorb the same amount of protein, you would have to eat more of that protein source. So that's just the way the body works. If most of your protein currently comes from plant sources, it's probably a good idea to eat a bit more overall to make sure you're actually getting enough protein absorbed by the body. The remainder of the protein that isn't used from plant-based sources is just going to be converted into something else, and it's not going to be used in muscle repair. It's not going to be used in muscle growth. So how do you space your protein intake out throughout the day? If you look at any of the scientific literature, it will probably tell you that eating 20 to 40 grams of protein per meal, spaced 3 to 5 hours apart, optimizes muscle protein synthesis, which just means protein being used for either muscle repair or growth. But for the average non-bodybuilder or non-professional athlete, it doesn't really matter. You could eat one meal a day if you want, and as long as you hit your total amount of protein in that one meal, you'll be fine. Is it optimal? Probably not, but are we training for the Olympics or are we just training to be healthier and stronger? I'd rather do something far less optimal that I can do consistently than do something far more optimal that I can do less consistently. And there's also a myth that the body can only process 40 grams of protein per meal, which is just not true. Your body can process about 40 grams of protein per hour, but even if you had 120 grams of protein in one meal, do you think that it's going to be in your digestive system for less than the 3 hours necessary to digest that protein? Well, unless you have the world's fastest metabolism, your body's probably going to have far more than 3 hours to deal with that protein. So to recap, protein is very important, but you don't have to have a maths degree to figure out how much you need. Aiming for anywhere from 110 to 140 grams per day as a rough guide is more than enough for most people, either trying to maintain muscle at the lower end or build muscle at the higher end. Try and eat more animal-based protein than plant-based protein, but if you do decide to eat plant-based protein, remember that you'll need to have more of this, and spacing your protein out throughout the day is more optimal. But if you just don't like eating frequent meals, you don't have to do that. So I really hope this video helped clear up how much protein you need. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.